And the parvas were so large, and Professor Venivitana, who's here, will tell you that they can really carry a lot of weight. And I'll show you where they carried 14 elephants. 14 elephants in a pada boat. And across this passageway, because the elephant auctions were in the north in Jaffna. It was for the same reason that the British erected upon these rocks the Great Basses and the Little Basses, 2 lighthouses 6 miles away out at sea. It is no doubt for the same reason that the Chinese named the Little Basses and the Stone Wall Rocks and the Great Basses the Iron Pincer Island. The lodestone theory of the Persians in the Arabian Nights is popularly associated with these iron islands. The legend states that, and I quote, "The mountains of lodestone, towards which the current carried them with violence, and when the ships approached it, they fell asunder. The nails and everything that were of iron flew from them towards the lodestone." Scientifically, utter nonsense. Because ships never used iron nails. But this is the poetic phrases of the Persian poets. And if you go there to the Great Basses and Little Basses, you'll see the Mount of Wrecks underneath. And that's where Arthur Clarke began his work in 1960. And when we went to the legal department to have this area reserved, they had a problem. Because nautical miles, it was only 600 yards or 6 miles. 6 miles from the coastline was considered territorial waters. But these islands were 6 miles, 600 yards. So it was outside territorial waters. Now, they were trying to help the department, and they found a quotation of 1874 or something, where they said the rocks of the Great Basses and the Little Basses belonged to Sri Lanka or to Ceylon. Now that was the legal point. Is an outcrop of rock land or not? And our legal luminaries will probably tell you, but the Attorney General's department was favorable, and they said yes, rock is land, and therefore they extended the limits or territorial waters of Sri Lanka beyond the Great Basses to another 6 miles, and allowed us to declare this area as an archaeological reserve. So sometimes the legal authorities help us. And that's a map, a Dutch map, of course. A Dutch map which shows the Little Basses and the Great Basses here, and that was 6 miles away. The final consensus of decision by the early sailors was to traverse the first route via the Mannar Straits and Aden's Bridge. This journey is described by Dionysius Pericles thus, and I quote again, "Turning aside from there, before the southernmost promontory, you would straightway come to the great island of the Cholas, Taprobane, mother of Asian-born elephants, above which, high up in the heavenly zodiac, turns the shining crab," and I unquote. That's a drawing from Percival of 1805 showing a sketch of the elephant kraals in Matara. Elephants were caught there, taken to Jaffna, not by land, by sea. And the auctions were under the governor, the Dutch governor of Jaffna. And here is another sketch by Tennant in 1860, also showing the noosing of elephants at the kraal. And this is an interesting logboat. This is logs floating, and that was a bridge across the Nilvala River. And see what is interesting there. A typical Dutch lifting device to lift the bridge to allow the ships to go through with the 14 elephants. The log-drawn bridge at Matara to enable a load of 14 elephants in a pontoon boat to sail the animals for the auctions in Jaffna and be sent overseas. Elephants were sent even to India. For example, Shen Ho, in his first expedition to the southern ports of India and Sri Lanka in 1405 to 1407, with a fleet of 317 ships. Can you imagine 317 ships in the Bay of Beruala? If you really go to the lighthouse there, you can see there is enough room. And these are not small ships. Shen Ho's ships were 400 tons, as against the biggest ship of Europe of that period, when Britannia ruled the waves, was only 360 tons, and that never went off dry docks. It sunk in the dry docks. The ship that took Columbus to America was only 180 tons. But we have records in the British Museum which says there were ships as large as 700 tons sailing round the coast of Sri Lanka. 700 tons. What happened to this art? The art of boat making. And here, a fleet of 317 ships and 27,870 troops arrived at Beruala. He repeated this exercise 7 times, and only on one occasion did he not anchor in Sri Lanka. While on his 3rd voyage, he even considered it appropriate to carry away the king of Raigama as a prisoner to China. And for what reason? He refused to allow the tooth and the bowl relic to be taken to China on the request of Shen Ho much before that period. So he couldn't get the tooth and the bowl relic, and instead took the king away. Of course, the king was returned 1 year later, but he was left a Sri Lankan community in China, so he left. And they came to Sri Lanka about 5 years ago to see their relatives in this country. But one other thing, the tooth and the boat relic were both together up to this period of time. But you look up every record, you find there's no mention of the bowl relic thereafter. What happened? They believe it was enshrined in one of the stupas in Anuradhapura at the Natha Valley. But that's for future research. Here's a sketch of the Shen Ho ships in the 15th century. And these are some sketches which I photographed at Natha Valley after Nimalji Silva and his painting team cleaned up the wall of the Natha Valley. These ships appeared on this 14th century temple, but in the 17th century the Portuguese sketched these ships. You can see another ship there, and yet another ship. And around this Natha Valley we found the cannonballs of the Portuguese, which they used where we do not know, but they were found there. This is a sketch of a ship from the 1st and the 2nd century AD among the Brahmi inscriptions. That's a typical Yatra Dhoni from the Maldives, and then a few other ships. And this is a sketch of Solius Mendis at Calania Temple, showing the arrival of the sacred bow tree with Sanghamitra, bringing it along from Tamralip, the port of Calcutta, and the king going down waist high into the waters to receive it. It's an artistic picture. And this is a Samban craft from Indonesia in the 8th century, carved at Borobudur at the foot of the stupa. Now, listen to the word Samban. How does Hamban Tota come? From Samban. Hamban Tota was where the Sambans came in to Sri Lanka and linked up from the Indonesian islands to Samban came to Hamban Tota. The word Hamban Tota is a continuation of that. And these are many other ships that are sketched in various places. Shanti, Barut, Andhra, then Arungabad, Ajanta, Borobudur, Dutch, Roman, Chinese, and Chinese again. Ships of various places and different periods. There is yet another question that needs to be cleared in terms of the Mana Channel, and that is with reference to the two waterways that lay at either end of Aden's Bridge. Apart from the Mana Channel that we have discussed so far, there is also the Palmum Passage at the Indian end of Aden's Bridge. This is referred to by de Queiroz thus, and I quote again, between them there are only two channels, one the broader between Mana and the point of Khardiv, capable of voice, only the other near the island of the pagoda of Ramakol, that's Rameswaram, of less depth, where it is necessary to tanava. Remember that word tanava, that is to say, to disburden the rowing ships of their cargo and take them on at the other end. That's a sketch of Rameswaram Kovil of an earlier period. And then we have Baldius, who was a chaplain to the troops that captured the Portuguese fort of Mana in 1658, describes the channel thus, and I quote again, "We shall now speak of the island of Mana, which was anciently attached to the continent as the shallow straits, designated Adensburg, but too clear by indicates, but too clear, well, it's something wrong. Thereabouts lies the island Ramakol, where there is a rich and famed pagoda under the Tanava